Loaded show here at Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff. 3 big topics to discuss. Trey Hendrickson. Could the Dolphins trade for him? Could Miami flip Tyreek Hill for DK Metcalf? And we'll also talk about a free agent target Miami could go after that we haven't really talked in depth about over the course of the offseason to this point. But we're going to start with Trey Hendrickson because it was the news of the day on Thursday afternoon that the Bengals have given the Pro Bowl edge Hendrickson permission to seek a trade. This guy finished second in DPOY voting last season, one of the best edge rushers in all of football. And I'm honestly stunned that the Bengals are choosing to go this route. Hendrickson is probably looking close to $30 million per season over 3 years on his next contract, which I get it's hefty. Cincinnati is a small market team that doesn't often pay big time deals. But if you had to choose between two of Hendrickson, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, I probably would go with Hendrickson and Jamar Chase and let Higgins walk, but it looks like they're going to attempt to keep the wide receiver duo intact and let the edge rusher walk before he turns 30 years old. Before we get into him and a potential target for Miami, make sure you are subscribed because Monday marks the beginning of NFL free agency. We will be live on the channel for day 1, and if we get good viewership and have a lot of fun, we'll go live for day 2 as well on Tuesday. So hit that sub button, join us, and don't miss our coverage for the free agency period. I mentioned Hendrickson as someone who is a DPOY candidate. Yeah, no joke. Over the last 2 seasons, he's been a top 3, top 5 edge rusher in all football. He's a durable, he's a physical guy, and when you combine for 35 sacks over the past 2 seasons, yeah, that's going to generate a lot of value for yourself based on free agency or based on the trade market. And even though he's a dog in both the run game and the pass rushing department and a top 5 in edge in football, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. He simply doesn't make sense for the Miami Dolphins. I know I've already gotten some questions about if he could be a trade target for Miami, but specifically after the Dolphins restructured Bradley Chubb's contract, it is very clear that Miami is not going to go after a big-time edge in free agency. They might sign a vet min type of guy to be that 4th, 5th guy behind Chubb, Phillips, Chop Robinson, working in with Mo Kamara, or draft one on day 2 or day 3 of the draft. But in terms of going after a big name, yeah, I think you could cross that off a list, specifically when he would have a contract of $15.8 million for this season. Like I mentioned, if they did not restructure Bradley Chubb, I could see this as an option for Miami, because they could have post-June 1st released Chubb, saved $19.5 million in cap space this year, taken on Hendrickson's salary of $15.8 million, and then extended him long-term on a big contract. But right now, you're pretty much set at the edge department, man. Like I mentioned, Chop and Jalen Phillips are expected to be your starting duo next season. Chubb will work in as that 3rd guy. Mo Kamara, the second-year man, who was a mid-round pick last year out of Colorado State, will be your 4th or 5th edge rusher, and you'll probably sign another player to be that 5th guy behind Mo Kamara. That's how I see this edge group unfolding for the rest of this offseason. So when edges come available in free agency and on the trade market like Hendrickson did, I do not think it's going to be something Miami ultimately pursues. But do you think differently? Should the Dolphins pursue a Trey Hendrickson trade? Type Y if you would want to go after Trey. Type N if you're good on holding off and would just like to keep what Miami ultimately has. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you also have to take into consideration, not only would it cost you a pretty penny as he is 30 years old and less to get him because of his production, but he's also going to want to be paid $30 million in annual average salary. You just saw Max Crosby get a contract extension. Crosby's better than Hendrickson, but Max got 33, 34 per season. Yeah, that's around where Hendrickson's going to want to get. So between trading a first-round pick for him, which Miami would probably not want to do, and having to pay him, I'm out on Trey Hendrickson. But could they go in on a trade for wide receiver DK Metcalf? I didn't think I was even going to talk about Metcalf on the channel, but I have seen many people talk about this possibility on Twitter. I've seen a lot of people talk about it in the YouTube comments on our videos as well. So we're going to bring up Metcalf because a couple of days ago, Pelissero had the note that Pro Bowl wide receiver Metcalf has requested a trade, and the Seahawks agreed with Metcalf to potentially explore options. Metcalf, 27 years old, is now the top wide receiver potentially available. If he was a free agent, he would be the top one, and on the trade market right now, he's the top guy since it looks like T. Higgins will be staying in Cincinnati, but I would probably argue that Metcalf was a higher commodity than Higgins anyway. I think it's a super unrealistic idea for Miami, considering his price tag for this season and how they would have to extend him as well, assuming you're trading for him for the long term. But like I mentioned, people have asked if the Dolphins could trade Tyreek Hill for Metcalf, because I have often said that this is the last year Hill will be in Miami due to his contract next season. You had that debacle at the end of Week 18 against the Jets, and Metcalf fits this Dolphins team better alongside Jalen Waddle. He just does. We've talked about how Miami is desperate for an outside physical wide receiver. DK Metcalf is an outside guy, an ex-guy at 6'4", 235. I will put a little bit of caution on him. He's not as good as a contested catch guy as you would think, only having about a 36.9% contested catch rate last season. But he is someone who consistently flirts with 1,000 yards receiving on a wide receiver or in a wide receiver room that was loaded with Tyler Lockett. They drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba. Geno Smith has his ups and downs. He is an absolute stud wide receiver. There's no debating that. But we know Tyreek Hill's production is better. We know Tyreek in a vacuum is probably a better wide receiver. But due to Metcalf's physicality and his ability to be that X on the outside, and probably complement Jalen Waddle better, many have wondered if the Dolphins should pursue a trade for DK Metcalf. So I want to ask you this before I give you my official answer. Which wide receiver fits on the Dolphins roster better? If it's DK Metcalf, type DK. If you think it is Tyreek Hill, who has had 3 good seasons in Miami, type TH. Before we even talk about who's the better wide receiver, if any of you are asking if a trade could happen with Metcalf in Miami, the truth is not really, unless this got delayed until really late in the offseason. It's not really financially possible for Miami to swap Tyreek Hill for DK Metcalf unless it happened after June 1st. Miami could save $15 million in cap space by trading Tyreek Hill after June 1st. We've talked about that. But his number in terms of trading him post-June 1st actually goes up. He has a $27 million cap hit for 2025. It goes up to $28.3 million if you trade him before June 1st. So there's no motivation or benefit to moving off of Hill prior to that number and that date. But trading him after, his cap hit comes down to 13, 14 mil, and that's where you save some money and where it becomes feasible. But DK Metcalf, if he actually is traded, will not be waited out, and it will not be delayed until post-June 1st. These teams that are going to be going after DK Metcalf, like the Packers, like the Patriots, who are going to be heavily interested on DK, they're going to want him now. And apparently the Seahawks are seeking a first and a third-round pick in trade comp for DK. Metcalf is also seeking that new contract I was talking to about, where he wants to be paid similar to A.J. Brown and company at $30 million per season. There's a lot of interest. I think Pittsburgh's another team, so the Steelers, Patriots, and Packers are probably the 3 teams at the top of the list, in my opinion. It would suck if he went to New England. Now, that first and third price tag might delay this trade process for Metcalf because I don't think anyone's going to match that. Josina Anderson reporting that one team is willing to offer a third-round pick. So that's where teams are at. And Josina followed up her report with another quote tweet that said that same team is actually saying right now that the Seahawks are asking for way too much in a Metcalf trade. So maybe there's some disconnect between Seattle and teams across the league on what DK's value is, but I think teams are going to meet in the middle. He's probably worth a lone second-round pick, and I think that is going to get done sooner rather than later. Seattle won't want Tyreek Hill. They will not wait till post-June 1st, so it doesn't make any sense for Miami. So although Metcalf may fit the Dolphins' needs in terms of getting younger and get that physical wide receiver on the outside more than Tyreek Hill, and it makes sense from a scheme perspective, financially and time-based, it's not going to happen. This trade request happened in June 7th and June 8th. Yeah, we could have a conversation. But with it happening now, yeah, it's not going to happen for Miami. All right, we're going to round out the show in just a second, but we are having to tell you about this shirt that we have on sale. $5 off when you go to chatsports.com/DolphinsGrayShirt. That link's in the description and comments of today's video. If you want to represent the Dolphins and get $5 off a sweet-looking tee, well, Links in the description and comments. Like I said, one more time, chatsports.com/DolphinsGray. Sure. All right, we'll round out the show with this. Could this be a target in free agency for Miami? Safety from Minnesota, Cam Bynum. This is a safety that we've briefly mentioned as a target, but never talking about him in depth because I never really thought of it as a possibility, and I thought his price tag might be a little bit too high and similar to Jevon Holland's. But the news on Thursday morning coming out from Tom Pelissero that the Vikings and their third-string safety last year, Theo Jackson, agreed to a 2-year, $12.6 million extension. Now, it's interesting to note this because while talking to our Vikings host, Patrick Seatman, I was stunned by the money Theo Jackson got. Decent third or fourth safety, but $6 million per season is a borderline starter, and I think they expect him to take a big leap and a big role on that Vikings defense next season. And he believes that Cam Bynum may not be re-signed after the Theo Jackson news. And Bynum was one of those key pieces of the Vikings secondary a season ago. Excellent cover guy. He's very rangy. He has a knack for getting after the football. You see it, 3 interceptions. He was the man that was choreographing all of the dances for the Vikings defense after creating those turnovers. And the turnover thing is good for Miami. The Dolphins ranked in the bottom 5 last season in turnover rate for their defense. That was the 2 big things that the Miami Dolphins struggled with. They struggled with getting sacks, 27th in football, and forcing turnovers, 27th in football. That's the one thing he does it extremely well. He is good in coverage, and he forces turnovers. You can question about his ability to tackle, even though his tackling numbers are pretty solid. Only missed 10 tackles last season, had a missed tackle percentage of 10.1%, which was an upgrade over Jevon Holland, who missed 12 tackles last year and had a 17% missed tackle rate. And 5 of those missed tackles that Cam Bynum had were just against the Detroit Lions. So you take away those 2 poor games he played against Detroit late in the year, and he was a very steady tackler. He is a good football player. But there is a little bit of a reason why I do still think it's unrealistic to expect Miami to ultimately sign Cam Bynum. I like him as a player, but I don't think Miami will actually target him in free agency, and I'll explain why in just a second. But based off what you've seen statistically from Bynum, would you go after him in NFL free agency as a Jevon Holland replacement? Type S if you would sign him, type P if you're passing on Cam Bynum. I do not believe the Miami Dolphins will ultimately sign Cam Bynum in free agency or target him due to his price tag. Jevon Holland is rumored to get anywhere between $15 and $20 million in free agency, which is why Miami, even though they have interest in bringing back Holland, are not going to re-sign him. Bynum is an excellent cover guy who forces turnovers and would be an ideal Holland replacement schematically. But it is rumored that Bynum is going to get anywhere between $12 and $18 million per season over multiple years. That's very similar to Jevon Holland, which is why Miami, I don't think, is going to go shopping in that price range for a Holland replacement. I think they're going to live in the $7 to $10 million range like Julian Blackmon and Andre Cisco, like Cam Bynum, but I do not expect Miami to ultimately go after him when free agency opens on March 10th. And when free agency opens on March 10th, we'll be live. So make sure you are subscribed, have those notifications turned on, because when the Dolphins make a move, we'll have you covered. So hit that sub button.